Well, welcome. Thank you so much for taking time out of your days to come join us today. My name's Layla Aman. I'm the city manager for the city of Manzanita, aka the project manager, aka a bunch of other things that I do for the city. But for once, you won't be hearing from me all day. We have a really excellent team here today that's going to be guiding this process. But I wanted to take a moment to just introduce myself, briefly introduce the team, and then kind of go over sort of three key things. First being, what's the need? Why are we even here today? What kind of budget are we talking about? And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the design process and how far we're scoped to go in this beginning phase, what that means, and sort of how the decisions will fall into place as a result of that. So I know it's not news to anyone, but we need a city hall for a number of reasons, and I think this has been 30 years in the making. And I know there's many of you that have participated in past processes, and the design team will talk through a little bit about how we're going to be using that information, how we intend to move forward with that information. But this really is what I'm considering a new look. So I'm hoping that everyone's bringing their best selves today. We're going to have lots of small group conversations. And the point is to really help move things forward. I came to Manzanita, I'm a doer. I like to build stuff. I like to get things done. And the way to do that is to build it on the foundation of community input and feedback. And so many of you I recognize from town halls that we've just recently held. Been going to bed every night reading 140 pages of raw feedback and trying to distill that down into meaningful information that we can use to help our decision makers create policy that reflects the values of this community. I think everyone in this room knows and understands we have a lot of work to do and a lot of things to accomplish. And so one way to do that is to talk to the folks that live in the community and start to establish that. So this is one of many efforts that the city is undergoing. City Hall is certainly a priority, but it's a priority of many priorities. One of the major parts of my job and that of the council is to ensure that we're hitting things left and right. We can't just be mono-focused on one thing. So while this is really important to the city, it's not the only thing. So I think as many of you who participated in the budget process, or if you didn't, it's live on TV. You can go back and watch it if you like. But I talked a lot about how there's a multifaceted approach to how we deal with many issues we're facing. We have issues we have to deal with infrastructure. We have to figure out how to deal with livability in this community as it relates to short-term rentals, and that being almost 70% of the city's income. How do we start to offset those things so that we can start to hit all of it? So it's going to take steps in every direction, and this is just one of those. So the need, I could wax on forever about why there's a big need. The first need is you probably don't want to stand too close to me because I don't smell great, because my office is so hot during the day because we have absolutely no ventilation. It's one of the many things is that we're kind of square pegging into a round hole. The entire administrative staff and our police are working in dilapidated, well-used facilities. And why that matters isn't because, staff feels like they need to have a nice space. We need a safe space. We need a clean space. And we need an efficient space. And I'll give you a good example of an experience I had today. I have a short-term rental program manager who I need to interact with a lot. She's located up at the water treatment plant, and she's shoehorned in with my building official and my planning and permit tech. The only way I can talk to those folks is either by email, phone call, or if they make the trip down to City Hall. Whereas today she was coming through to get the mail, and I was like, hey, Judy. And we knocked out 2 hours worth of emails and a 15-minute conversation. These are the types of things that many people experienced with COVID, for example, when we all started to work at home. We lost that ability to connect and work together. And so that's one example of why that's important. So I have my staff working in 3 separate buildings. So I'm paying 3 bills, 3 amounts of insurance, dealing with 3 buildings that have deferred and ongoing maintenance costs. And from an efficiency standpoint, it's not sustainable. Now, we've all done a great job, particularly my police officers who work in this space. This just gives you an example of where our records are stored. This is the city's record storage, which is in the bay of the police office building. There's some challenges with that as far as record retention, safety, and access. This building has mold in it. It's really not a safe, comfortable environment for folks. And again, it's just about how efficient does this work for us when we're trying to deal with records requests and other things. And the reason why it's in this condition is because we had an old city hall that was full of mold that we had to evacuate, really, and move into a temporary situation, which we are now going into year 3. And I want to highlight 30 years we have been kicking the can, and we cannot wait another day, because every day that you wait are costs added to the project. And we can talk about where we were in 2017 and where we're going to be when we actually go to construction on this project, and I guarantee you that delta is going to be huge. So I just want to say that it is in the forefront. It is not the city's only priority, but it is a necessary priority. The other issue for me as the chief administrator of the city, I can't serve the public. I can't serve you. We don't have a safe space to have meetings. I can have one-on-ones and two-on-ones in my hot porch, and many of you, I've met with you out there, and it's either too hot or too cold, and barely sometimes in the middle. And that's not a way that I want to treat the people of this community, and it's not the way that you deserve to be treated. We cannot hold in-person meetings. We have to hold them here. And as you can see, the amount of effort it takes to set up a live stream, and if I have a council, because I'm now required by law to film and allow for people to participate via Zoom or some other option in in-person meetings. It is not sustainable for me to do that here. The amount of overtime and setup that it takes and the logistics are not really effective, and they're certainly not a good use of my time. Whereas I could just walk into a room and have a meeting. That's a very different perspective. And so not being able to serve the community in the way that you deserve to be served is problematic. And many of you that I've met throughout this time, I've met either elsewhere, on your porches, on my porch. I want an opportunity for us to get together and to be able to do that more easily. We've held some town halls, we've had to hold them here, they've worked out well, but I want us to be able to do that in our own facility, and I want you to be able to use that facility as well. So the need is urgent, it is necessary, and it's 30 years in the making. I just want to highlight that. It's 30 years in the making. And no amount of kicking the can down the road is going to make it easier, cheaper, or less complex. So as a doer, I'm here to get it done. And I have hired a team that's going to help me do that. The big difference between what you went through before was more of a visioning exercise. It was like, what are all the things that we want? How could we make this the latest and greatest? We are now at a place where we have to build what we absolutely need. And that is a facility that can serve the public, that can safely hold our records, that allows our police officers to have a place to safely process evidence and to do their paperwork and necessary items without breathing in mold. That is what we need. And so the team I've hired is the team that's going to build this project. I have folks from Klosh Group who are owners' representatives. These folks have expertise and background in construction and building, and they know how to get this work done. We've hired Bearing Architecture to help us with the design, and we hired them because they know how to work with the community and they know how to engage with you to get things done. The next step is we have a CMGC, which is a construction management general contractor. That firm, once they're hired, will be the firm that builds the project. And so together, this team will help us develop options, evaluate those options with real cost data based on today's dollars, not looking at stuff 5 years ago, but how is it going to affect us today? How is it going to affect us when we actually build this project out? So that's the need. That's what we're dealing with. The budget we're working with is based on my initial analysis and working with this council on establishing what we can afford to build within the resources that we have. And we've had multiple discussions about this with the city council in public. That's the only place we talk about this. And we've determined that the debt service that we feel that we can handle is somewhere between $3 to $4 million for hard costs. And I want to highlight that, hard construction costs. Those are the costs that will actually construct the building. There's other costs that go in line with that. Paying our team who needs to design this building and put it all together. All the furniture and the equipment and the technology that we need is not included in that number. So, and all of the outreach that we do is also not included in that number. So I just think people need to understand that what we're talking about a $3 to $4 million project is something probably more in the range of 5. And that's at this point in time. And that was something we talked about 6 months ago. And so as we move through the design process, the reality is going to come clear about what it actually is going to cost. But what I'm looking for is value. What I'm looking for is sustainability, because we can't build a building that's only going to be here 20 years. We're talking, how long did I say? 30 years we've been in this process. If we built a building that was only going to live for 20 to 30 years, we'd be having the same conversation again. And so we're going to be weighing a whole lot of things in terms of what the values are and how this building will get constructed. And so I just want to make that clear and upfront. It's going to be a learning lesson, and the next council that comes in will be the council that makes the decision on how much and how we're going to pay for this. And we were going to have to talk about income in order to do that. So it's just a reality, and I think all of us just need to be aware of that. And I look forward to having those conversations with the next city council and with the community in terms of what are the values that we have, what are the things we're willing to pay for, and how are we going to get there. And so I'm looking forward, and I welcome everyone's feedback on that. The next thing I want to talk about briefly is the context. And so one of the things I just want to highlight is, and I just like highlighting this. I call it my tax shame slide, which is folks that pay taxes to the city of Manzanita. It's not a lot. I think many of you know that the entire city of Manzanita is about $225,000. That's it. That's all we get from property tax. And that's supposed to cover things like maintenance of roads, system development charges. I've heard a lot in the town halls about this, which gets me very excited. But those don't cover things like potholes and system maintenance. Those things have to come from the users of the system. That's you, that's us, that's other people. And so that's the tourists that come here. And so we're going to be having some real conversations as we move forward about how are we going to offset some of these costs that we have coming in, which we've been subsidizing through the general fund for the last 30 years. And that's not sustainable either. And so I have a budget revenue diversification process that's already kicking off. We've hired Eco Northwest, one of the leading economic consultants in the state, to help us look at what do we have, what do we need, and how are we going to get there. And that process will be integrated with how we look at how we're going to fund this project. So unfortunately, nothing's simple. Everything is connected. All of this stuff matters, and we can't just be mono-focused on one thing. We cannot solve $45 million of water infrastructure and delayed maintenance in 1 year. We have to look at it in the long term. And being someone who comes from a planning background, who's a regionalist, who looks at how do we get done today and how is it going to affect us 20, 30 years from now. And that's the perspective that I bring to the table and how I'm looking at this process as well. This is one of many things. And we are going to be looking at all the resources we have. How do we lift it all up and start doing better in terms of providing services and funding those services with the people who are using the system and who are benefiting from the system. And so there's a lot of work to be done, and I look forward to your engagement in that process as well. So as far as this goes, how far are we going? Well, the design team is going to be working with me, and they've been very gracious in setting up kind of a weird contract. We're only getting through what we call 30% schematic design. And if you haven't gone through a design process, there's kind of 3 main processes. There's schematic design, so that's sort of the big picture dreaming. What do we need? How do we start to narrow it down? Conceptual ideas. We can start to get real pricing out of that exercise. 100% schematic design then leads to design development. And that's where we start asking, where are the floor plugs going to go? Where is this going to go? And how do we start to detail out the specifics of that design? But we have to get the envelope. We have to get the major building pieces put together. We have to know where it's going to go on the site. And we have to have a better understanding of what it is we're trying to build. That's what schematic design does. This contract goes through 30% SD. So we only get to that point. And at that point, we will have enough information from you through, and Chris, our architect, will talk you through that process to get ourselves our first kind of rough order of magnitude cost estimate in today's dollars. And we'll be looking at options, and Chris will talk about that as well. So I just want folks to know that that's all we're doing up until we get a point, and then the council will give us a go, no-go at that point. And the reason why I set it up that way is because what I didn't want to do is spend all the money to get us through construction documents and then decide we're not going to do it. So what we're going to do is figure out what can we build, what's it going to look like, what is that, how is that going to actually affect us from a financial perspective, and then the council will determine, can we actually do this? And I say yes. I think where there's a will, there's a way, and we can find a way to do this, but it's going to take creativity around how we fund this. It's going to take creativity around how we build this building, and we're going to have to really, as you'll see, dial back our big dreams, but also lay the foundation for us to dream even further once we get farther along. And so that's kind of where we're at in the process. And I'm very excited. I really think I've been through a number of public projects, and this is really starting with the community, involving all of you in this process from the start and helping us make those decisions. So by the time council has to make that financial decision, they're backed by your feedback and your input, and that's the most critical part of this process. So again, I thank you for coming today, and I welcome you to participate, and we'll have small group meetings around the table, so I look forward to hearing the conversations that you have. And I think with that, I'm going to hand it over to next slide. Oh, Clash Group.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you very much for letting us come in here and talk to you today and kind of hear the feedback that you're going to give us today at the breakout meetings. But I'm Jeff Caldwell with Clash Group, Seaside High School graduate. So usually people get over that and don't hold that against me from different parts of the coast. I understand what that means. We are doing a. Oh, do I need to stand over here?
Yep, thank you.
Yeah, try to stay off camera. So we're doing a number of projects at the coast now. So we're doing some projects up in Astoria. We're working with Jewel School District, Napa School District, here of course in Manzanita, and then probably one of the bigger projects on the coast that we've done is the Seaside Convention Center. So when we were hired for that project, it was actually the first time that I got to come back professionally and do a project in the community. And as a resident of Seaside, it really meant a lot to me. So I understand, what we're here to manage is the rapid scope, schedule, budget, right? So whatever that mandate looks like from the community, from that perspective, we're going to make sure we adhere to that. Mark Winstanley, who was the city manager, it was the largest, at the time, the largest capital project in the history of Seaside at $15 million. And he said, Jeff, you can't spend $1 over that. And so got it, and we came in under budget. In fact, one of the success stories of that project was we had planned it originally for being 4 to 5 phases and ended up being almost 20 some phases. And we set aside some contingency dollars, and because of the way we managed the project, and because of the way we managed the general contractor, the design, and during the process, the contingency dollars that we had saved during the process, we were able to put back into the building to make sure that they got more building than what they had anticipated, rather than spending it on unforeseen conditions and that kind of stuff. So we understand scope, schedule, budget, mandates, protecting your dollars, and making sure we do the fiduciary responsibilities, as well as give you something that represents the community at the end of the day that we can all be proud of. And especially for the folks that live here, we have a project manager that works for us that lives up the road in Arch Cape. I have a number of friends that live here and have homes in Manzanita. So we get it, we get the coast, and we look forward to doing this project. So thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Chris Keene. I'm the owner of Bearing Architecture. I'm here today with Andy from my office. We're really excited to be involved in this project. I know it's been a long time coming. I don't know how many of you are familiar with us, probably not many. I'll just quickly tell you a little bit about our firm. We're a small design firm out of Portland. We do a lot of work with nonprofits and municipalities, and in recent years have really kind of tried to focus on work on the Oregon coast. We're working currently at the Oregon Coast Aquarium. We're doing some work for Lincoln County. We're doing some work for Lincoln City. Doing a little project right down the road in Garibaldi for the Tillamook Estuaries Partnership. So we are familiar with the coast, and we're also familiar enough with the coast to know that every one of those communities is different, right? And so where we start the project is there, right? We're here tonight not to show you any ideas, but to try to engage you the first time here and learn a little bit more about this community, learn a little bit more about the things you guys care about, so that we can take the information that we've been gathering and the research that we've been gathering and move forward in a way that's going to make this process work. We've got a pretty great full design team here. Tonight with me is Chelsea McCann from Walker Macy Landscape Architecture. They will probably be with us for a number of these public engagement processes in this first phase that we were talking about that Layla described. Really, we've got, as you all know, a site that's a lot larger than we need for the program that we're looking at adding to it. So part of what we're going to be doing is thinking a lot about that site and master planning, or at least visioning a larger project for the long-term use of that site, right? And so some of that stuff is what we're going to start talking about tonight. We've got civil engineers, MEP engineers, structural engineers on the team, all folks that we work with a lot, all folks that are great collaborators, and really some of the most cutting edge sustainability engineers out there. So we think we've got a really great team for you. Obviously, it starts with the city and you guys, and that's who we're all working for. Jesse, you want to talk a little bit about the other partner that we're going to have here?
Hi, my name is Jessie Steiger. I'm a project manager with the Klosh Group. My role is the day-to-day project management for this job. So I work closely with all of the consultants, architects, contractors. I hire and manage all of those contracts. I do a lot of work on the budget for this project and the schedule, working with Layla a lot and other city folks to understand the program and the needs, and then also working with the community to try and gather and distill the information we hear into some usable bits and pieces. And the next thing I'm working on hiring is a general contractor, which we call CMGC, so it's a general contractor and construction manager. And really what that means is the art of construction has evolved. I think back in the day, we used to be all low bid contractors and we all suspected them of cheating us out of everything. But the profession has evolved a lot and they know so much. They're a really valuable resource to have on the team. And it helps a lot. They're going to be helping us a lot with costing exercises primarily. We've got probably a full renovation option to look at, probably a hybrid model, probably new construction. And we need help to understand what all of those costs are. We also need help to understand what our subcontractor labor market is. You know, if we want to take on something that's maybe more challenging, there may not be the right expertise in the area to do that. We might want to rethink that design solution. So we should be having them on board by early November. So we will have probably 2 of these meetings, and then we'll get to start to hear from the contractor about actual construction costs and actual challenges, maybe with parts of the renovation ideas, or challenges with various subcontracting fields that they can help us work through. So they're going to be on board here pretty soon, and we're looking forward to having them and having that expertise on.
So I promise we're not going to stand here and talk at you all night. Real quickly, this is what our goal is here tonight. I want to spend a couple more minutes talking to you about how we're going to approach this project, talk to you a little bit about the process, because that's really an important piece. I want to quickly review the goals and themes that came out of that last effort, just to kind of refresh our memories and make sure we're not missing anything or there aren't things that have changed. Chelsea's going to just kind of talk to us a little bit about the site, just kind of high-level analysis, just to set the table for the conversation. And then we're going to break out into groups, probably table by table. You'll have one of us at your table, and we've got a series of prompt kind of questions to kind of facilitate a conversation. What you're not going to see from us today is any kind of design proposals or solutions. That will come slowly, and then with the next meeting, you'll start to see some options there. Oh, sorry, and then we've got some image boards up in the back, and I think while we're doing the conversations, one table at a time we'll get up. There's some red dots and some green dots on your tables, and this is really just, these are not proposals, these are things to react to, right? Red dot I don't like it, green dot, I do like it. Negative reactions are just as helpful as positive reactions, as we're trying to gather kind of the community sensibility here, right? Because when we start working, we want to be taking on as much as we can an understanding of how you guys think about your community. Okay, so what's our approach? We recognize, starting right off the top, the last process was unsatisfying for a lot of people in this community. We don't want to repeat that. We want to design a process with you that is going to lead to success. And we know that that begins with kind of building trust. And hopefully tonight we can just start the very beginning of that with our conversations. So what is success, right? In our mind, just so you know, the design team's definition of success is designing a project that this community can support and it can afford and we can build. It is to nobody's advantage. It's not worth anybody's time to go through a process that ends up with failure. So what are we going to do? We're going to look at multiple options. We're not going to come back to you with one option. We're going to look at multiple options. I think Jesse already mentioned. We're going to look at a new building option. We're going to look at a renovation option for the buildings around the property. We're probably going to come up with some sort of hybrid that uses part of one and builds partly new. We're going to exhaust those ideas and as much as we can to try to get at the right thing. We are going to do this iteratively. In other words, we're going to come to you. We're going to get your feedback. We're going to go back and work. We're going to come to you again and ask you for more feedback. We're going to try to, hopefully, over the course of the next several months, narrow as we go along. But the intention is here to have a process that you guys are involved in. We see ourselves as facilitators and not, we're not handing you a design. We're facilitating and hopefully teasing out a design from this community that everyone is excited about. And of course, none of that is worth doing if we don't have real numbers. And so as we get a little bit further along in this process and we have our CMG on board, those options that we present to you are going to come with cost information. And it's going to come with cost information from the contractor who's going to build it. And they're going to keep us in line, and they're going to force all of us to make some difficult decisions, I suspect. That's the way it always seems to go. But we don't want to be looking at something and falling in love with something that we can't afford. We don't want to waste anybody's time by doing that. And ultimately, what we're here tonight to talk about is that process. How do we design a process that's transparent enough that you guys feel invested in this decision making? And then when the time comes to go to the city council, whatever we're proposing has the support of this community. So this is a pretty crude roadmap of where we're headed. We started with that green, or that yellow, get under contract. That was a couple months ago. We've had a couple meetings with staff and with the police department to talk about right-sizing the program. Really, what do we have to have? We also want to know what we'd like to have, but what's our core building footprint? We continue to work on that. I think you'll see that the numbers that we're looking at in terms of square footage are considerably less than what was proposed last time. And we're in our first public meeting here with the big red star on it. These meetings across the top are all workshops that we intend to host with you all. It'll be an alternating series of meetings. We're going to have a meeting with you. We're going to go back. We're going to do some work. We'll meet with the city. We'll present to you again. We'll take that feedback and repeat. By the time we get to the end of the year, we'll be entering into this schematic design enough that we can get, hopefully we've narrowed from, let's say, maybe 3 options to 2. We'll see. Then we'll get some real deeper dive kind of cost information that we can use to evaluate the schemes so that the council and that you all can make your final decision and recommendation. So again, at the end of the last process, there was a number of community goals that came out. Value, durability, all of these things that we talked about when we've got tight budgets, which we recognize are critical. Flexibility, meeting the culture of this community, and that's what none of us here are from this community, right? We come here, we know it a little bit. We want to hear from you what that means, right? What does it mean to talk about the culture of this community? And then a project that's environmentally sustainable. We've got a really great MEP design firm working with us. We've got Walker Macy, who's done a ton of incredible work on kind of sustainable landscapes. we've done a lot of work on the coast. We understand kind of the low-hanging fruit of really efficient envelopes and really simple mechanical systems. You know, we want to design something that's appropriate and as sustainable as it can be. Next slide. And then some of the themes, again, culture, inspiring workplace for staff. You know, we want to make a beautiful building for you too and for the staff. For all the reasons that Layla kind of laid out at the beginning about how they work on a daily basis, but also how they interact with you. So at the moment, I'm going to turn it over to Chelsea, and then we're going to break out and get into our conversations here.
All right, thank you, everyone. Again, I am Chelsea McCann. I'm with Walker Macy. My firm specializes in landscape architecture and planning, and so our job is to think about the site itself. So what is this site going to be? As it's already been said, from the City Hall standpoint, you don't have enough program to fill this whole big site. So part of what we want to talk about today is kind of what does the whole space become and what are the opportunities there. And as part of my job, it's to help create a vision with you and with, hearing all of your thoughts and come up with a concept that fits the site, addresses your needs and what you want to see there, and fits within your community and within the environment. And the place that we start is by site planning site analysis. So at this point, our site analysis, as Chris mentioned earlier, is very high level, just kind of getting a sense of what's here and how this site fits within the city and within your community. And so we're looking forward to hearing more from you about the specifics. But right now, as you can see, here we have the site located. It is to the west of your downtown, close to the highway. But it's interesting because it's not right in the middle of kind of the city center and where a lot of the energy is. So it's oh, sorry, to the east. Oh, yes. Gosh. Wow.
We thought it was going to be in the ocean there.
Bless your heart. West,
The radical
east.
proposal.
Yeah.
We have one.
Going too fast. I apologize. To the east. So it's not right in the heart of things, so it's a little bit outside of it. But where it is located within the tsunami evacuation zone, which is a great location for a civic use like this, because in the event of an emergency, a lot of people look for those kind of civic spaces to gather, to get information, find out what to do next. So that's a great aspect to it. One of the other things that I was looking at in terms of, kind of its location is what are the kinds of open spaces that you have? And of course, I don't want to neglect the fact that you have one of the most phenomenal open spaces of any community, which is the Pacific Ocean and beach. It is fantastic. But what I did notice was within the community, I didn't find a lot of public open spaces or parks. So maybe that's something that is needed. But overall, I don't want to come up with any answers for you right now. We just want to hear from you. If you have an open space here that you could develop or a program that should be fit there, we want to hear what your thoughts are on how that space can be used. We go to the next slide. Zooming in a little bit closer to kind of that site level instead of the city level, you can see that the site itself is pretty open. Hopefully you've all been there, you've walked through it. There's not a whole lot going on out there right now. There are some mature trees out there, and I do understand that the site gets used for your farmer's market, in which case it gets programmed, and it's really exciting. But overall, it's a fairly large, open, flat area, which leads us to a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of space that could be used, and so we look forward to hearing from you what you'd like to see there. So, do you want to?
Yeah, I think so. I think maybe we'll all. I'm going to grab a cup of water, and then one of us will kind of come to your table, and we're going to turn the lights on, and we've got some series of prompts, and hopefully just kind of start a little dialogue and conversation. We've got some big pads here. We're going to be taking notes, kind of the high-level stuff that comes out of this conversation. And after maybe 20, 30 minutes of doing that, we'll kind of come up to the front and ask one of you from each table to kind of, just talk through the highlights of what that conversation was. While we're doing that, I think Layla is going to tap one table at a time to come up and do our little dot exercise in the back. So it'll be a little crowded, a little loud, but hopefully you bear with us and we can get through that as well. And then we'll have some time at the end for some kind of wrap-up conversation and talk about next steps.
I have a really quick question.
Sure.
You mentioned an MEP consultant,
Yes.
but you didn't mention a name.
Sorry. PAE. They're a firm out of Portland.
Very
You
familiar.
must know them, right? Yeah.
Very familiar.
Yeah. So,
Maybe stay with me.
sorry again. Yes. Yeah. MEP is mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineers. So typically, when we talk about sustainability, obviously there's many parts to that, but the landscape is a big part of that. But in terms of energy efficiency, we really lean on our MEP engineers to kind of help us with that. And in the case of PAE, they're kind of a nationally recognized firm that have done some really cutting edge stuff. So they can talk the language all the way up to the most kind of current technology, but they also really understand this environment, the coastal environment, and kind of what the opportunities are. And again, what I always come back to this word appropriate, right? For a project like this that is going to have a budget that's, it's not a massive budget. We've got to be conscious of that the whole way along. In a community like this, we're always looking for what's appropriate, right? What's appropriate in terms of the architecture, what's appropriate in terms of the budget, what's appropriate in terms of the process, right? And so that's kind of where we're starting from, and we're hopefully going to design that process with you and get to what is appropriate with you as well. So take a couple minutes and then